All the time, no matter what's going on. I don't really understand the attraction of that day to day. So you're asking the questions above my pay grade there. Now, when I was younger, that would have been a different answer.
Specifically, you're here to talk about the terrorist threat. Do you think people should stay away from things like that because of the terrorist threat?
Things like that are highly politically charged, yes, I would think so. Yeah, some of them are not just, however, just plain events where a lot of people congregate, no matter what the reason, are attractive to terrorists. And Y2K is a unique situation. And I believe strongly the thrust of these briefings has been we need more sensitivity among the public of the kind of threats that are there. Now, you're going to have to take risks sometimes. I mean, you can't stop everything you do. But when you take a risk by trying to do it in a sensible way, and the people that we have that are under guard all the time, they take risks every day, and they know that. But they try and improve their chances, and the American people should.
This gentleman over here.
We've all read about the steps the government is taking to fix the Y2K computer glitch, but we don't hear too much about what, if anything, they're doing to prevent the kind of threats that you're talking about over and above what they usually do. All of you guys, if you read this, have had a lot of contact and worked with the government for a long time. Do you know of anything that they're doing that way, special for Y2K in the year 2000, the new millennium?
Well, I'll let my colleagues also address this, but obviously U.S. intelligence has been ratcheted up to look at potential threats to the United States coming from any area. Local police departments are waking up very quickly to the fact, and other emergency services, that this is not the time to have any type of leave policy whatsoever. There are going to be an awful lot of people staying at home and working through this period of time. You probably saw the article in the Washington Post today indicating it's going to be a long night for not just computer programmers, but other people who have various types of responsibilities that get into the area of emergency services, state, federal, and local government. We're going to see that in corporations too. We know of a lot of corporations that right now are looking at the problem, and they're trying to get out in front, consistent with some of the things that Tom Ondeck said, get out in front of this by having people on staff that night, having all their experts, their technicians, everyone that they need to remedy a problem available so that they can show the best effort in the event that they have a problem. So it's agency by agency. If you look at the congressional report card for agency compliance, you see that some federal agencies have done a terrific job. Others are lagging way behind.
That's with the computer glitch. I'm talking more about national security.
But I'm just saying you're going to see the same, I think, thing in terms of national security. You're going to see some agencies, I think the FBI, other major federal police agencies are taking a very, very careful look at this right now. Whether they all are at the same level, I think that's open to some question. Anyone else that like to respond? Sir.
I'm wondering, Russell Mokhyber, I do a publication called Corporate Crime Reporter, and you mentioned in your booklet here that you support corporate counsel in developing strategies for white-collar criminal defense and white-collar crime and so forth. Your focus today, though, has been on terrorism, and there's been a lot written about Y2K affecting nuclear plants here in the United States, possible nuclear disasters and so forth. Do you have any information on that and what risks are posed to the population by nuclear plants going off, meltdowns, that kind of thing?
Well, we're not involved in the nuclear industry. Some of us have worked in conjunction with security matters in it in the past. What I can tell you is that obviously because of the nature of not only maintaining power, uninterrupted power supplies, but also in terms of the dangers associated that are all very recognizable with the nuclear industry. I think more is being done there than almost any other place in the country. I don't think this is a problem that they're suddenly realizing is out there. And I have not been as persuaded as some that maybe this is an area that we're going to see, anything approaching a major meltdown or some type of problem at a nuclear plant.
Could you have a second question? You said that you believe, and other police officers believe, that there's going to be a spike in crime at the Millennium.
Mm-hmm.
Are you talking street crime, or are you talking about white-collar and corporate crime? Is there going to be a spike in white-collar and corporate crime at the Millennium?
It's possible, but we're really talking crimes of violence. So that rules out white-collar crime, although, let me caveat it by saying, with everyone spending so much time preparing for the Millennium, they're not doing other things that they should be doing. They're not looking every place they should be looking. And we know that there are going to be opportunities for hackers, for those that want to take advantage of computer systems. And they may well do that because of the emphasis on Y2K problems as opposed to ordinary policing. But the problems that we're talking about policing-wise relate primarily to bombings and to acts of extreme violence. But if you get a breakdown of services, then you may also see increased street crime, you may see looting in some areas, you may see all the residual problems that flow from that. Anyone else want to? Okay. Yes, sir.
Wouldn't any terrorist, Osama bin Laden, or anybody else as sophisticated as they might be, also be subject to any sort of computer glitch in any sort of terrorist campaign they'd want to carry out? Aren't they subjected to the same? Don't they need to travel and have sophisticated communications and everything else that police need, and wouldn't they be subjected to the same problems?
Bob, you want to?
The level of sophistication isn't that high. Any travel that they would be doing would be done months in advance. No, I would say limited effect on them.
And their devices are not generally computer dependent in any way, so they've got plenty of time to get set for this, as Bob was saying. Other questions?
Could I ask a question of your
Sure.
legal expert?
Tom, you want to step up here if you could?
You've talked about legal liability for Y2K and the legislation that's about to become law. Do you believe that, obviously computer companies have known about this problem for years. Shouldn't those who made the mistake pay for their mistakes? In other words, do you believe there should be a limit on liability?
Well, let me ask the question another way.
Why don't you just answer?
No, I don't.
You
I
don't
don't,
believe
no.
there should be limits on
No,
liability?
because if it's my kid in the hospital that suffers a misdiagnosis and mistreatment, I don't want to be told, I'm sorry, this is you can't sue anybody. You can't sue the computer company. You can't take your suit that far. You might be able to sue the doctor, or that you can't sue anybody because it's too big a legal issue. So you're going to have to eat it. Your kid is going to have to eat it. I don't see it that way.
Yes, sir.
You've gone over throughout the presentation places where might or might not be unsafe. Could you just sort of capsulize that? What's your advice for people around this time of year? Where should they go, not go, do, and not do?
Well, I think that if we were approached by one of our corporate clients in this area, we would probably say that because of potential travel problems in other parts of the world at that time, we know that the spacing between jetliners is going to probably be extended in some areas, and time sequencing and so on, because people really don't know what's going to happen. And we do know that some civil aviation systems are far behind others. I don't think that's a terribly good time to travel. I wouldn't travel. I don't recommend it. If you travel early, come back a little later. But try not to travel on the days immediately prior to and immediately after the rollover. The kinds of places that I don't think I would go, and I love all of these places under ordinary circumstances, but I'm kind of like Admiral Crowe. I'm getting too old for crowds too. But the fact of the matter is that I don't think that you're well advised to go places where there are existing terrorist movements, where there have been attacks against tourists in the past. Egypt, I would probably rule out. I would probably rule out Jerusalem. I would probably rule out Peru. I think you're probably better off being someplace else, in the bosom of your family, frankly, at home, watching it all on television. But yeah, if you feel that you want to take the risk and understand that you should be aware of the problems and risks you're taking, go to Times Square, go to the Champs-Élysées in Paris, go down to the mall here. But do be aware of the fact that something could happen, and these are very inviting targets. And if something does, then you may regret it later on. If something doesn't happen, this is the history of things that don't happen, you'll say, well, it was all for naught that I even worried about it. But the fact is, we think something will happen somewhere. Yes.
Could you say, Jim Wolf, Reuters, could you say a word about how long you think that some of these problems may be serious issues representing threats to business continuity and public order? In other words, if we get through the date rollover safely and without any major disruptions, how much longer down the line could this still crop up and represent a serious threat?
That's one of those questions that we don't have an answer to right now, and neither does CIA or anyone else. They basically indicated it depends on what happens. That in the United States we'll probably have, according to best estimates, days, if not weeks, of problems, and they'll be sporadic. They'll be in different communities, different locations around the country. They'll be in different areas of the economy. Abroad, we may be talking that some nations are as much as 2 years behind on fixes to their computer software. And in those cases, if armies don't get paid, if pensioners don't get paid, you may see the toppling of governments. You may see reverberations like that. If their banking system doesn't work, if their civil aviation system or their export system doesn't work, we can imagine all sorts of consequences in other parts of the world. And those may ultimately impact here for as long as they're going on elsewhere. But I don't think that we're going to see in the United States the kinds of problems that we can anticipate abroad. And let me also ask Rudy Maxa to step up here on your travel question. Rudy is our managing director of crisis communications, and as you know, is the Savvy Traveler on National Public Radio. And Rudy, on the one hand, is interested in having people travel all the time. On the other hand, he's got some good thoughts about prudence on this occasion as well. So I'll turn the mic over to him.
The only one thing I wanted to add to what Neil said, his good advice about traveling several days before the change of the calendar year and several days after, is also to travel early, because that's before systems get backed up. But also, I'm sort of disturbed by the fact that the airlines are crowing about how 50 to 51% of their tickets are now electronic tickets. The one thing I would counsel is using paper tickets during travel during Christmas and New Year's, the December holidays. The simple reason is, except for Air Canada and American Airlines, computers can't talk to each other. So if you're holding an electronic ticket and something goes wrong, your ticket cannot be endorsed to another airline. So you want to carry, if you're a traveler during that time, insist on a paper ticket during the holidays, so you stand in one less line and wait 2 less hours in the airport. That's the little sign I was holding up, paper ticks to you in the back. So that's my, just wanted to add that PS to for the travel folks.
Sure, Admiral.
We spent quite a bit of time talking about celebrations and whether they're safe, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's been overlooked in the process this morning. We can protect large gatherings, and we can attract attractive targets. For example, this town did it when the NATO heads of state assembled here. So what we're suggesting is that when you have a large group like this on Y2K, it must be protected. Now, there are a lot of cities and towns and organizations outside of Washington, and what we're saying to those people is it's all right to have festivities and so forth, but don't have them that are not protectable, and make sure that your community, your police force, the enforcement people are sensitive to this problem, they're engaged, because if a terrorist is making a plan and he sees that it is a highly protected target, he's going to go somewhere else. And it's just not Washington, it's the entire country that should be sensitive to this, and not just for Y2K, probably for the next decade. But you can do things, but if you're going to go to a rock concert and it's not going to be protected, of course I wouldn't like the music anyway, so.
I'm glad you added that, Admiral. Yes, sir.
Steve Cochran, Wyoming Emergency Management Agency. As you know, Dr. Livingston, out in our part of the country, there's a little bit different lifestyle. However, the city leads, yeah. However, I've come into some information, though must stress it's unsubstantiated at this point, that some of our local communities or groups within our communities, we're taking neighborhood watch to a new level, I think, are in fear of marauders, the Millennium Marauders running up and down the interstate, stealing their water and fuel and food. And their plan is to blow up strategic bridges along the interstate to prevent that from happening. Have you heard anything else like that around the country, or is it just us up in the part of the country?
Well, Steve, I think that you raise a good point, and that is that there are some people out there who are going to great extremes over this, arming themselves, as one of the earlier speakers noted, and basically going to extremes. We hear about the women who have gone in to buy wood-burning stoves who live in apartments in New York, things like that. So obviously this can be carried too far. I think the Admiral's words were the operative words, and that's prudence. And if we have people out there that are going to go too far, we have to watch them as well. And as a consequence, if we do have any major problems, so in some areas, we're going to have to be very concerned about people who decide to take the law into their own hands, or to undertake some type of special activity that they think is going to help the community at that point, and kind of deputize themselves to do it. I think anyone in law enforcement fears that as much as they fear the basic problem. Any other questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Jody Wiggins. I'm from Dun & Bradstreet. I was wondering, you said to take out about 60 days worth of cash. Is there any fear that there's going to be runs on the bank or precautions against such a thing?
Gary, you want to?
I understand from talking to some of the people in the banks that they are already supplying cash, and that there's a printing going on to increase the supply of cash available. So the answer is, I think that the banks have recognized this, probably the feds have too, and I think as individuals we should be prudent enough to take out enough cash to get through a period of time with, yes.
But in the Wall Street Journal and other publications, there's also speculation, even on the low end, that maybe 6% of the people will get out of the stock market at that time. And that's a tremendous swing of capital, just drawing out of the market. So just drawing out of banks, drawing out of the market, drawing out of ordinary commerce. Obviously, we have to be careful and watch all of those things right now.
Jack Kelly of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. You've done a good job of identifying another Y2K problem, but how do you rate it in relation to the basic technical problem? Is it as bad a problem, or worse, not as bad?
Well, I think you could poll my colleagues on this. What we can say about this one, because there's so much debate about exactly the nature and scope of the computer problem, the software problem, we won't really know where we're at until, according even to the federal authorities in this country and to CIA and so on, until that date actually comes and we see what the problems are. But I think we can predict that there are going to be a series of other difficulties around the world as people attempt to mark the millennium. And I think that they're interrelated problems in many respects. In other ways, they're not. I can't tell you which is the worst, but obviously I think the computer problem is the larger, the greater, the more difficult problem. If we have good policing, if we have good programs to protect people who are going to be celebrating the millennium, we can reduce the likelihood some of these other problems may occur. Anyone else want to?
I hear a lot of concern about, are things going to go real bad here? And I think I ended my talk saying, I think be prepared is a good motto. Let me explain it in a different way. I'm from the Navy, the Admiral's from the Navy. We wouldn't consider going to sea without a life raft. And Lord help us, we hope we'd never have to use that life raft. And that's kind of how I look at this. I look at this as a life raft, and I hope you don't have to use it. And that's my perspective.
Mike?
With respect to terrorism, what do you think the likelihood is that the United States will be blamed in the underdeveloped world as that the Y2K problem, the computer chip problem, was an American Western plot from the start?
Well, we're already seeing some accusations of that nature right now, and I'm sure we'll be the scapegoat in some countries where they basically have not devoted the time, the resources, or what have you, to fixing the problem, and they have to answer to their public at that time. It's inevitable, but I think rational people probably will not see it as any vast conspiracy, but just as a stupid decision made by programmers early on that was repeated over and over again to save 2 digits in the programming space. Sir, you had a question.
Yes, Ken Barksdale from Bell Atlantic Disaster Recovery. In reference to the question that the gentleman asked in the back concerning how far this is going to last, I was wondering if any of your folks have heard about this report where some offshore coding was done. And in checking this coding, people found that it seemed as though there was some bugs in there that would trigger in 2013 and 2014. I was wondering if any of your folks had heard about that.
We've heard some anecdotal stories that way, and that there are various worms and viruses and other things that are that hackers and maybe even some foreign governments want to take a run at some of our computers during this period of time. This is an optimal time to do it. Once again, our attention is going to be focused on the rollover and the transition, and it's always possible that people are putting other gimmicks into the other types of problems into computers, into our software right now, because virtually we're scooping up programmers all over the world. A lot of this problem is being solved in places like India, where they have a massive number of programmers, and this can be done by modem and so on by long distance. And it is possible in our rush to make things right. We're not looking at the fixes as carefully as we might. So I think you're well advised to raise that issue, and once there's some time afterwards to make certain that the fixes don't contain surprises down the road. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Brian Carlton from the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority. Just a few minutes ago, you made the statement that we know that some civil aviation systems are less prepared than others. What systems are those?
Well, according to, we've got a pretty good list of those, but we know that China has complained that it's got significant problems in compliance right now. We look at many of the developing countries and the international civil aviation authorities trying to assess these in terms of trade groups. They've commented on the problems that they see in developing countries, and they've listed most developing countries as having at least some lag time in that regard. But I could provide that information to you if you don't have it already.
Are these in any U.S. systems in the FAA?
We did not see any U.S. systems here. I imagine that you will have airport problems, once again getting into some of these smart buildings, and if we have power failures and if the backup systems don't work the way that they're supposed to, the redundancies. But right now the United States is probably certainly in that top tier of countries in the world of being fully compliant. Rudy?
I think, and since you work with the Metropolitan Airport Authority, I'm probably not telling you anything new, but the problems you'll see in the United States are the parking thing, where you put in the computerized parking thing and it doesn't let you get out, or it charges you for 1 year's parking, or millennium's parking perhaps. It happens. It's true. It happens now, says the Admiral. But just 2 weeks ago, I hosted a conference in New York on millennium travel problems, sponsored by the American Society of Travel Agents. And a gentleman from Geneva was in from IATA, the International Aviation Transport Authority, Air Transport Authority. and he's in charge of the Millennium 2000 problems, and he was asked the same question. And they're keeping the list very, as you probably know, very closely held, because first of all, there's still 6 months to go, and also it's embarrassing to some countries, and the impression you get is primarily third world countries who don't have the resources to fly in consultants and work around the clock on it. They don't want to reveal the names. And I said, well, will there be when you go through the x-ray machines, will there be a sign, just as there are now about 2 airports in the world that the FAA doesn't consider safe, have adequate security measures? Will there be Y2K unsafe airports signs going up mid-December? And he said, we're hoping to avoid that, which is quite a very political answer. But I am hoping, if it's a huge disaster, and they have airports who aren't cooperating in some countries, that they will post those kinds of notices, or at least make it available to the media. But IATA was not about to share the list with even people in the travel industry of who's lagging behind.
Other questions? Well, we thank you for your attendance today, and we hope we've given you something to think about and look forward to seeing you again in the future. Feel free to call us if you think of anything that we have not addressed today. Thank you.
Very nice to meet you. You wouldn't bring out 12,000 FBI agents on standby, and for the first time maybe in FBI history, cancel everybody's annual leave for a 20 to 30-day time frame right over Christmas and New Year's. As one FBI agent who wouldn't be quoted said, you know, that's very significant. In my line of work, that's called a clue. All right, friends. Now you have a clue. The Phoebes, the FBI, think that maybe something might be happening as we move into Y2K. So when everybody says to you, it's nothing to worry about it, we sure got a lot of FBI agents, 12,000 of them, who are going to be on duty right through Christmas and New Year's. Something's going on, folks. We know now, don't we? That's when the federal government says, everybody goes on alert. I guess we better go on alert, too. All right, in the next hour, a really great guest for you. His name is Ken Goddard. He's been a criminalist.
LOT will...
when it comes to preparing for possible Y2K problems. The latest now on our top story.
We're concerned about were completed by June 30th. They've been examined and approved by the Science Applications International, an independent contractor.
Hired by us to find out what we wanted them to find out.
Right. So relax. Breathe easy. Also, the Department Inspector General gave his approval. He is what is known as an in-house watchdog. I believe the term is lacking.
Yeah.
So not to worry.
Sit at the bar, have a few more drinks, and tell us what we want to hear. It's good. Everything is hunky-dory.
Works just fine.
Absolutely. Fly on, McDuff. You still want to fly January 1?
No, my wife has put the kibosh on that. I was going to do it just as a promo.
Right.
She said, if you want to do that, you got to work at Y96.
I'd rather have you eating the pig's foot. Fly on January 1st.
Smart girl you married there, Bob.
That's right. She wouldn't let me do it. Seriously, I tried to book it. I wanted to be taking off at midnight.
Mm-hmm.
Just because of, bragging rights.
Yeah, that's guts, man.
There's a little JFK Jr. in all of us, in the terms of taking risks. You know, there was an article that said his mom encouraged him to take risks, encouraged the children to take risks.
They certainly listened to their mom, because a lot of Kennedys have unfortunately died from taking risks.
Yeah, but some people die, some people don't. I don't think your life has any spice in it unless you take an occasional risk. Do something.
Yeah, that's right. That is the spice.
We all do. I mean, you ride a motorcycle.
Yes, I do.
I order 4-star pad thai every once in a while.
You go, danger boy. Oh man,
You know,
boat.
and I boat. And if something happens to me in the boat, if I get caught in a flash storm or make the wrong decision to go out, which I've done once
You lost
already.
your power in the shipping lane.
Did
Right?
that?
That's some high risk stuff there.
A friend of mine in the marine industry told me what happens to small boats that lose their power in the shipping lane.
You get run over.
He said, and when that big tanker runs over you, all that happens is that someone below says, "Here's a noise on the hull," ba-doop, 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 and they go, what's rolling around on the bottom of our hull? So we all take some kind of a risk.
I don't know. I'm not. I don't think it's a big risk to do what I ride a motorcycle.
I think that's a huge risk. Yeah, you see, that's the thing. All of us that take a risk don't think ours is, I parachute. I know what I'm doing. And
I skydive, but it's completely safe. I go to Kapowson, the sizzler of skydiving. Oh man!
No, I mean everyone, and you know, I'm always getting into it by email with rock climbers. I was out yesterday hiking, and I climbed to the top of Little Si, and here are these people hanging straight off the cliff. Now, to me, they're all nuts.
Well, they're risk takers.
They're
clearly.
taking a risk, but then they'll write back and they'll say, "Here's what we do. It's completely safe." One of the things you don't want to do, though.
So, if they're as sure as you are, why is he having to give up his ski vacation?
Well, I think that they're doing it for the public benefit. I mean, they're going to have to be cautious because that's just responsibility. I mean, because the basis of the whole thing is no one really knows what's going to happen. I don't have a crystal ball, and this is my opinion. My decisions have to be based on what I believe, just like everyone else.
What are you doing to prepare your own family?
I'm doing absolutely, totally nothing.
Randy, you're in Portland, Oregon. What are you doing for your family?
Hi, Ollie.
Hi.
Hi, Dr. Smith.
Hi.
Listen, my wife is a computer consultant out here in the Portland area. And she's been working on Y2K stuff for 6 months. And everybody that I know, that she knows, all her colleagues, are all saying the same thing, that nobody knows what's going to happen. And if somebody says they do know what's going to happen, they're just trying to sell something. The point is, what is wrong with putting away a little bit of cash and a little bit of food? Being prudent. It's a dangerous message to tell people, don't worry about it.
Ted, I got criticized all over the place for saying, look, I think you ought to treat it like I do in preparation for, I live out in the Blue Ridge Mountains. In the middle of winter, it is not at all unusual for the lines to come down with a load of ice on them, and we'll be without power for 3 or 4 days. So I have a generator, I've got water, I got 7 wells, I've got pumps, I've got, all kinds of sump pumps as well as well pumps, because I got, 75 head of livestock to feed, and I want to make sure that they don't go, thirsty with all of the ponds frozen over.
Well,
so,
like
that's how I've prepared for it.
Like I say, her and all her colleagues have put away a little extra food and a little extra water.
Sherman, is that irrational?
Cash, and they feel more comfortable.
Well, I don't think that's not irrational. I think that, if someone was genuinely worried about it, I certainly wouldn't give the advice that you don't have some cash around that time. What I'm saying is, don't cash out your investments and buy and put it into gold.
But you agree with the idea of
Absolutely.
making darn sure you got a paper copy of all the transactions.
Sure, that's something you should have anyway.
Right.
I mean, one of the good things that may come out of this, it may make people more aware that they ought to keep good records. And
my daughters are listening.
Exactly,
and
they ought to check behind and know where they are financially and et cetera.
Randy, let me ask you this. Without giving away the computer company your wife is working, is she working on Y2K related problems?
She's been working on Y2K related problems for 6 months. She has several small municipalities around the Portland area that are her clients.
And what is she doing with them? I mean, is it? I mean, I'm going to give you some of the ones. Water, traffic. I mean, talking about the computers to control the traffic lights, which in many major municipalities, and I would guess Portland is one of them, are sequenced for certain times of the day and certain days of the week. Like Washington, D.C., they are genuinely concerned, based on the tests that they have run, that the traffic light system, which is designed to move traffic into the city early in the morning and out of the city late in the afternoon and operates on a completely different schedule on weekends won't work on the 1st of January. Now, that may not be such a bad deal because shutting down this government might make us all a safer place.
Well, I can't say where she works, but I know that there
I don't
are
want you
several
to,
municipalities, small municipalities, that are saying that we're not going to do anything, so we have plausible deniability.
They're not going to do a thing?
Not going to do a thing, so that they have the option of saying, well, we didn't realize it was this big a problem. Avoid lawsuits.
Let's talk a little bit about those lawsuits, and let's talk a little bit about the people. There are computer and software companies that have made billions on Y2K.
Absolutely.
Are you saying it's a wasted effort?
I'm saying that they've made billions to find out generally nothing. A lot of them have. And then, two, there have been computers that have been fixed, and they have gotten them compliant. And you're talking about in our system, our economic business system. They warned everybody early on, especially small businesses. This is where you can really, really get hurt if you're not compliant. And there's going to be some of those that will. There's going to be a storm that's going to pass through some of the small business arenas, but most of them that have become aware, there's all kinds of software on the market. You can check your computer. If you're, after 1995, at least, I doubt if there's a computer out there that's not Y2K compliant. IBM, and I quote, we've been Y2K compliant on every computer worldwide since 1987. One of their engineers last night, who came to hear me speak last night, confirmed that quote that I gave to him.
Good, so it's good reason to go out and buy an IBM ThinkPad.
It's who you believe. I mean, that's the point. The engineering department of these computers tell you the truth. The salespeople say buy the software.
We'll be right back. Dr. Sherman Smith and Y2K.
The Executive Vice President of the National Rifle Association, Wayne LaPierre.
Can you imagine how dangerous our roads would be if police stopped enforcing drunk driving laws? After all, even the toughest law can't work if it's not enforced. But that's what's happened with our gun laws. Under the Clinton-Gore administration, federal prosecutions for gun crimes have fallen 46%, virtually cut in half. In the 1980s, America got serious about prosecuting drunk driving, and traffic deaths went down. Shouldn't we be just as serious about enforcing our gun laws? More government red tape might make the politicians in Washington feel good, but it won't make you any safer. Enforcing the law will.
It's time to get armed criminals off our streets and put them where they belong, behind bars. Call Congress today. Tell them you oppose the Lautenberg-Gore plan that punishes law-abiding gun owners. Call 202-225-3121. 202-225-3121. Paid for by the National Rifle Association.
Maybe you've thought about starting up a business in your home. Well, with the three-step plan, it's a very simple thing to do. This business...
Nation's capital. My guest, Dr. Sherman Smith, and the book Y2K. Billy, you're in Bremerton. Go ahead. What's on your mind?
Hello, Colonel Norris. It's an honor to speak to you, sir. A great honor. I have in front of me what purportedly is a U.S. Navy assessment in June, which they made in June of 1999 for cities where total failure is likely.
Just for the benefits of everybody, because real quick, as I want the doctor to be able to respond to this, these are seaports where U.S. Navy vessels are provisioned, fueled, they hook up to sewer and water, and they're seaports, like Bremerton, Washington.
Yes, sir.
Okay, right.
Exactly.
And there is great concern in the U.S. Navy that those seaports will be able to provide the services that those ships need when they pull into those ports.
Yes, sir. That's it. I just want to know how Dr. Smith responds to that, sir.
Go ahead, Doc.
Well, unfortunately for me, I don't have the inside, and probably Colonel North has more information about that side of the thing than I do. But just in talking to some of the military officials, some of them were concerned that we did have some older systems that needed to be upgraded, but most all of them told me they would be fixed in time, whatever problem they had.
Well, no, but specifically what Billy's talking about are not Navy systems. I mean, the fleet is fairly confident that they have fixed those systems that needed, and it turns out there's not that many of them. Thankfully, most of the fleet is fairly new. The problem that they saw was when a ship pulls into San Diego or Brooklyn Navy Yard or Philadelphia or Annapolis or one of the seaports in this country, Charleston, Norfolk, that the city services where they receive support, fuel, water, electricity, all that stuff, telephone, may not be able to give the ships the kind of service that they need, and therefore, as Billy just points out, the Navy is going to have to take care of their own. Now, the fleet's not going to sail on the 31st. There's still going to be more of the fleet in port than elsewhere. Worldwide, it's an even bigger problem. When you get to places like Diego Garcia and out in the Persian Gulf and Bahrain and places like that, where just ordering supplies, make sure that they order that stuff 30 and 40 days out, may not be there.
And that might happen. That certainly might happen. But what is not going to happen is the domino effect from that is not going to create a catastrophe that the world can't handle or America can't handle that will bring impending doom.
And you've got some great advice in this book for people out there. And I would commend it to you because I don't call this Common Sense Radio for nothing. I am commending to you Y2K, why the alleged end of the world year 2000 computer crisis is really just a hoax, as a prudent thing to buy and to look at. And again, give those websites out, Doc, so people...
All right, www.economicwars.com, and then our toll-free number is 877-569-1123.
Give them that phone number again.
877-569-1123.
Dr. Sherman Smith, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to join us.
My pleasure, Colonel.
When we come back, it's Free Phone America. You pick the topic, you dial the number. Oh, yeah, the number. It's 1-888-99-NORTH on Common Sense Radio. We talk about what's on your mind. What's on my mind is where we go on Waco. I'll be right back with more. I'm Ellie North.
How much do you think you'd pay for $100,000 in term life insurance?
Here's another one. Is all of this Waco stuff overblown? Janet Reno, over the weekend, taken to task by members of Congress. Here's Dan Burton and what he had to say about whether or not he would trust Janet Reno to investigate what actually happened at Waco.
Well, the Justice Department asked the Texas Rangers to keep this information under lock and key for the past 6 years. For them to say that they didn't know pyrotechnic devices were used just stretches credulity. I think the Attorney General should be held accountable for not telling the American people about this for the past 6 years, because if they didn't know about it, they should have. And Janet Reno and her supporters at the Justice Department have blocked us every step of the way. They've misled us. It's been a terrible problem for us. So when you ask me, do I trust her? I certainly do not, and that's why my committee is going to do a very thorough investigation of this whole matter.
Dan Burton speaking this weekend on Meet the Press, and Dan Burton says he isn't going to... I guess the problem I've got is that there are so many conspiracies out and about that it's almost hard to deal with them all. I mean, whether you go all the way back to the Kennedy assassinations, or to TWA 800, or to Princess Diana is still now being seen as a conspiracy. And I guess the question I've got for you is whether or not you think that these conspiracies are indeed as overblown as the Y2K conspiracy. Because obviously, none of these will affect Americans, you individually, as much as Y2K. And if overwhelmingly Americans believe that this whole millennium, TWA 800 affected the families of the people on the airplane and those of the rescuers, and that's it. And the people who spent months out there trying to figure out what happened on TWA 800. The Kennedy assassination doesn't affect a single American other than living American, other than Caroline Kennedy. I mean, that's it. She's the last living descendant of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. And I suppose perhaps, Teddy Kennedy and the rest of it.
Saying, I don't think we're looking at a collapse in civilization or anything. My wife is an active duty Air Force member through the National Guard. I'm an ex-Army combat medic infantry. And we know pretty much what the government's doing, but with my wife being in the Guard and she worked through the Guard for a state agency, I don't know if I'm at liberty to say what she works for, but she gets information, and they've canceled everybody's leave in the Guard for that period.
Right.
Y2K.
Starting right after Christmas, right?
Right after Christmas.
Yep.
Everybody is to be at the base or readily available. They have canceled all the leave for the police agencies, the state patrol. I think the government knows that there's going to be something going on, and I don't think it's going to be as widespread as a lot of people are thinking. I just think the government is not coming straight with us and telling us, yeah, you know, we have agencies or we have certain organizations that aren't compliant yet. There may be I think at the worst we're looking at maybe a power outage. At the very worst, power outage of 3 to 5 days maybe. I'm prepared for that. I have a generator. I work in construction now, so of course I have a generator. But I have stockpiled a little bit of food and if things do get bad, I have a place to go with my brother-in-law. We're just going to go camping that weekend. There's a lot of people out there that are just trying to get prepared.
Wait a minute, you're going to leave your wife on active duty, and you're going camping?
Yeah, I can't go with her.
I mean, okay, but why would you not just stay at home?
Well, I'm saying worst case scenario. If things start going bad in the city of Peoria or city of Phoenix, I just don't want to be anywhere near it. You know, I don't want to put myself in a position where I do own one firearm. I'm not a fanatic at that, but I don't want to be put in a position where I have to defend myself or interject in something. I think it's just best to leave that to professionals. If something happens in my home, so be it. That stuff can be replaced. What I'm looking for, I know my wife will be safe, or as safe as she can be. The rest of my family, I want to be with them and take care of them. I'm not looking, like I said, I'm not looking to create a conspiracy theory over all this. I just think the government's not being truthful with it.
Well, about what, though? I mean, look at...
About the agencies that aren't Y2K compliant. They're trying to minimize damage ahead of time without really being truthful with and saying, yeah, you can't expect some allergies. You can't expect loss of power. You can't expect this. Yeah, I think there's going to be problems with the financial system. I'm not talking a crash or a Great Depression coming along. I'm just talking if you try to use your debit card or anything, I think that's not going to work. So, yeah, you do need to be prepared ahead of time. Take some money out the day before. Just have some cash on hand.
By the way, if you're going to take money out of the bank, I would not wait till the day before.
Well, yeah, I agree with you there. And
I think that there probably is going to be a cash shortfall where people between, probably starting about the 20th of December, start saying, whoops, I got to get money aside for Christmas. And, oh, by the way, I think I'll take out a little bit extra. I think consumer debt is probably going to go up a little bit higher than usual because people want to hold on to some cash. I didn't say hoard, but hold on. And I think that there's going to be people out there that make it difficult to stock the ATM machines. Probably be a whole lot more robberies, I would guess. Thanks for your call. Got to take a break.
Radio America. Conservative talk radio at its finest. You're listening to the Radio America Network.
With SRN News, I'm Rich Thomason in Washington. They know they're not quite out of the woods yet, but officials in North Carolina are breathing a bit easier now.
Local level of failures, and therefore what we think ultimately we need to focus on as we move through this last 114 days is to try to get as much hard information into the hands of the public so that we don't get overreaction on the one hand, but we don't get complacency or underreaction on the other.
But if getting the word out was important, there were only about 100 ordinary citizens in the audience. There had been no notices in the New York press. Patrick Shannon, who said he runs a Y2K website, stood up and said,
I found out about this meeting in the Boston Globe.
The questions from the audience ran the usual gamut. Would food be available? Yes, Koskinen said. There's a 60-day food supply in the system. The trucks and planes were ready. The train system was a little behind, but should be fixed in time. A social worker stood up to ask,
in the case that electricity does go down, in the case that water and sewage go down, what are the contingency plans for the elderly and the disabled?
New York officials replied that meals would be provided, schools would be opened if heat was needed, and if elevators stopped, the elderly would be assisted. Deputy Mayor for Operations Joseph Loda said $300 million had been spent on compliance in New York City since efforts started in 1996. Independent auditors had checked these efforts and contingency plans were in place. John Koskinen said while the federal government and New York State was in good shape, there were concerns about public assistance programs, food stamps, Medicaid, run by certain other states, and some 800,000 small businesses were not Y2K ready, and many were assuming falsely, he said, that they could fix any computer problems that occur on Monday after New Year's Eve. After hearing that people should prepare as one might for a hurricane, have 3 or 4 days of food, water, and batteries on hand, some people in the audience asked if this information wasn't getting out a bit late, to which Deputy Mayor Joseph Loda replied that he believed this was just like politics. You shouldn't peak too early.
What concerns us in New York from a public relations standpoint is we don't want to cause a panic. And because we don't think there's a need for a panic, but we do think, trying to get food for a 3-day, 4-day period is something that can happen over a period of time. What value does it add if we start on day 114 or on day 90?
If you wait until the last minute, won't people panic, though?
No, well, we won't wait till the last minute. Yeah. We will start in October, which is 20-some-odd days from now, start the process through the last 3 months of the year. 90 days is more than enough time to put this together.
At which point, this man stood up at the mic. He is responded to by John Hughes of the Office of Emergency Management.
People don't know. That's the problem. You're saying that you have 110 days. Noah had 40 days, and people still didn't believe him.
Well, we're here tonight, but we also have those brochures that Deputy Mayor Loda mentioned. And I think, you should take personal responsibility and not rely on government to take care of yourself.
I'm not relying on the government. I got my generator, I got my food, and I got my flashlights because I was in the military and I'm not having it.
With so few people in the audience, these community conversations, as they've been called, have their own battle to wage against indifference and skepticism. Margot Adler, NPR News, New York.
The cleanup campaign in New York City is continuing. First, the city went after squeegee men, then street vendors, reckless taxi drivers, and now ferrets. This summer, New York issued a list of illegal wild animals along with bats, grizzly bears, and elephants. The health department added ferrets because they sometimes bite.